If you're just getting started with sourdough, sandwich bread is one of the easiest places to begin. It's super forgiving, and in this video I'm going to walk you through the recipe that's beginner friendly and can fit into a busy schedule. If you've been looking for an easy sourdough sandwich bread recipe, you ended up on the right video. I have one just for you because it checks all the boxes. So we don't need a stand mixer, the ingredients are super simple, and most importantly, everyone loves it. It can certainly also be made on the same day, but I think stretching it over the course of 2 days gives us a bit more flexibility, so we're going to do that today and tomorrow. And without further ado, I'll just take you along as we go and explain everything along the way. I highly recommend using a scale for this recipe. It's just more accurate, especially if you're still getting used to how sourdough dough should feel. You can use cups later on, but for now, if you're not sure what the dough should look like yet, a scale just makes everything a bit more precise. To keep things simple, we're starting with 310 grams of water. If you drink your tap water, use that, no need to overthink it. If not, use filtered water. My general rule is if it's good enough for you, it's good enough for your starter probably. Next, I just mix all the ingredients except for the flour first. So that's 310 grams of water, 110 grams of active sourdough starter, 20 grams of neutral oil, 15 grams of sugar and 8 grams of salt. I give that a quick stir to break up the starter a bit. It doesn't need to dissolve it completely. That just helps avoid big clumps of starter later when the flour goes in. A quick note on the starter here, don't stress about using it right at peak. You can even use discard, it will just rise slower and taste a bit tangier. This dough is super forgiving, so as long as your starter is still alive, you're probably fine. Then finally add 500 grams of all-purpose flour. You can use bread flour as well, but that might cause you to use a little more water, so if you're just starting out, stick to the recipe for now, use all-purpose flour. You can certainly use a stand mixer to mix everything together. I just think it's way easier to just mix it by hand. It takes 2 to 3 minutes and we get only one bowl dirty. And then we're going to do 2 to 3 sets of stretch and folds further down into the process, so we will develop gluten then. And the reason I think why that's simpler and also better is that if we mix everything up in the stand mixer and wait for the gluten to develop that way, the flour won't have the chance to absorb all the water yet. So the mixing process will be a little worse than if we just mix everything by hand, leave it alone for about 30 minutes so the flour absorbs the water, and then we have a more elastic, more smooth dough to work with. So what I recommend actually is mixing by hand and doing 2 to 3 sets of stretch and folds. But if you don't have time for that, you can go ahead and just use a stand mixer and mix for about 15 to 20 minutes. So just to give you an idea about the texture of the dough at this point, it's sticky, it tears easily, and it's completely unmanageable. But that will change once the flour will absorb all the water, and we will be doing stretch and folds for gluten development, and you'll see that this dough will completely transform in the next 2 hours or so. The important thing here is to just get rid of all the dry bits of flour, but otherwise this dough is nicely mixed and prepared for some rest to make it easy to work with later. After a short rest, you'll already notice a difference in the dough. It will feel smoother, a bit more elastic, and you'll be able to stretch it without it tearing right away. It's not done yet, but that's totally fine. What matters is that we can stretch it without breaking. That means we're starting to build up that gluten. I also suggest to always wet your hands before doing stretch and folds. It makes handling the dough so much easier and prevents it from sticking to your fingers too much. I usually recommend doing 4 stretch and folds, so you pull the dough up 4 times, rotating the bowl. But honestly, you'll just see when the dough starts resisting. You can see that it still stretches nicely, but then now it's just getting harder and harder. So I usually go up to the point where it's hard to stretch it up, and then I just kind of try to lift it do this kind of motion that I really have no idea how to describe, so I'll just show you. If I had to describe what I'm doing here, I am lifting the dough up and folding it over itself, then gently pressing it down into the bowl. The goal here is to create a bit of surface tension on top. And you can see the dough is already completely different than what we started with, and this is only the first round of stretch and folds. Here I'm doing the second round of stretch and folds, and you can already see the dough is easier to work with. It's smoother, more elastic, and that's exactly what we want. On the day I filmed this, I only had time for 2 sets, and that's totally fine. But if you can fit in a third, I do recommend it. Now, about the motion I'm doing after the folds, it's not something you'll usually see in traditional sourdough instructions. But from experience, it really helps straighten the dough. That's why I included it in this video, but it's still optional. Stretch and folds are way more important, and it's okay if you only do stretch and folds. After your last set of stretch and folds, cover the bowl and let the dough rise until it increases by about 50%. Now here's something important. Bulk fermentation always starts when you add the starter, not after the folds. So since we added the starter right at the beginning with all the other ingredients, your bulk fermentation time starts from that point. So even if your folds were spaced out or a bit uneven, that doesn't change the timeline. The dough needs about 6 to 8 hours of bulk fermentation from the time you mixed everything together. As for knowing exactly when to end bulk fermentation, I have a separate video that walks you through how to tell when your dough is ready, and I'll link it below if you want more information about that. But for now, just follow the recipe timing, don't stress too much, and adjust as you go next time based on your results. I'm shaping the dough now, and as you saw, I flipped it out of the bowl so the top, the side that was facing up during bulk fermentation, lands face down on a floured surface, and that's intentional. The top side is usually a bit drier, which makes it less sticky. So flipping the dough upside down gives you a slightly easier time when shaping. Then I gently stretch it into a rough rectangle. You'll notice the surface facing up is a bit stickier, and that's normal. Like I said, the bottom is drier, and that contrast actually helps when you roll the dough up. Now I'm just creating a bit of surface tension on the log I shaped. You can do this with your hands, but it was really warm when I filmed this, so my dough was extra soft and fragile, so I just used a bench scraper instead. But again, don't stress about this step. If this is your first time working with dough, just roll it up and place it in a parchment paper lined loaf, and this part really gets easier with practice. Once the dough is in the pan, cover it with something airtight. I like using a shower cap or just a plastic bag, whatever you have on hand. Then pop it in the fridge and leave it there overnight or for at least 8 hours. You can actually leave it in the fridge for up to 2 days. I often make the dough ahead of time just because I know we'll need bread anyways. So I prep it when I have a moment and then bake it whenever I need it in the next couple of days. Right before baking, brush the top of the dough lightly with melted butter. That helps the crust turn out just a little softer and prettier. Then bake it at 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 205 degrees Celsius for 45 to 50 minutes total. If the top starts browning too quickly, just loosely tent it with aluminum foil for the last 10 to 15 minutes. This happens to me all the time actually, but that will depend on how your oven heats. Mine tends to run a bit hot, so I guess that's why. So keep an eye on it, and if it's browning fast, go ahead and cover it. It's a really easy fix. If you want this bread to have more of a rectangular, angular shape at the top, you can also cover it with another loaf pan when baking. I actually really like this method. It's called the 2-pan method, and I have a whole separate video on it. But basically, it kind of mimics the effect of a Dutch oven. So it traps the steam in. So I think it makes this bread extra soft if you do it that way. But it's not necessary at all. As you'll see, this bread is amazing on its own, but I just wanted to give you an option if you happen to have another loaf pan to cover the bread with it before baking and get, I think, even more amazing results. I usually wait for about 10 minutes before I attempt to put this out of the loaf pan, because I just find that the parchment paper is much easier to remove. Here we go. Okay, here it is. I think it looks great. Just a quick tip here, sandwich bread, any sandwich bread, is actually easier to slice if you turn it on its side first. That way you're not cutting straight through the toughest part of the crust. I totally forgot to do that here, probably because I was focused on filming and making sure you could see everything, but it does make a difference, so give it a try. This bread stays nice and soft for about 2 days thanks to the bit of oil in the dough. It's not as enriched as some sandwich breads out there, which I actually prefer. I feel like in Europe we're used to simpler breads, and a lot of American sandwich bread recipes just go a little heavy on the fat and sugar for my taste. So this is kind of a lighter version of a sandwich bread, still soft, still great for slicing, but not overly rich. I'll link the full printable recipe down below, and if you have any questions or tips, leave them in the comments. I love chatting with you there. As always, thanks for watching. Give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful, and I'll see you next week. Bye!